Hey guys, so I wanted to do a review of a Jane Austen novel, of Northanger Abbey. And yeah, this is the novel that I believe Jane Austen wrote first, but was published last. She just had trouble finding a publisher for it, basically, so it didn't get published until after her other novels, but it was actually the first one she ever wrote. And I will just say at the outset that I really enjoyed this one. It was the first Jane Austen that I really liked. I have read other Jane Austen and read about three-quarters of a second Jane Austen. I read Pride and Prejudice in high school and hated it, and last year tried to read Emma and got about three-quarters of the way through before giving up because I was disliking it so much and just couldn't stand the idea of forcing myself through the last 150 pages. Um, I haven't had a great relationship with Jane Austen, and but this novel was just delightful. It was funny. It actually made me laugh out loud a couple of times, which rarely happens when I read. And every time I went to read it, that it didn't make me laugh out loud. It made me smile, basically. And at this time, with everything going on, I think that books that make us smile are the best. I was delighted to finally find a Jane Austen that I liked. And I think that having found, a Jane Austen that clicked with me will help me to return to the ones that I have read and hopefully see them in a new light. I don't know quite why I feel like I'm more ready to return to Pride and Prejudice than Emma, but I do feel like I'll return to them and look at them differently. I mean, maybe I won't necessarily suddenly love them, but we'll see. We'll see. And and I'm excited to read more of Jane Austen's novels that I haven't even touched. So, Persuasion, I think, would be the first one. I've just heard that that's one that I might like based on my tastes, basically. And Mansfield Park, I've heard some really interesting things about. I think that might be one that I would end up liking. Um, so, anyway, that was just a sort of preamble that just letting you know ahead of time that I did really like this and that I'm much more uh, on the Jane Austen bandwagon than I was before I read Northanger Abbey. And anyway, so Northanger Abbey is a pretty simple story. It's one of Jane Austen's shortest books. I don't have my copy with me because it's on my shelf in my bedroom and I was too lazy to go get it. It's a pretty simple story, one of her shortest books. It's about Catherine Morland, who is a 17-year-old girl who, in her younger years was a bit of a misfit. She was a tomboy. She didn't really take to quote unquote ladylike things, and in her later teenage years, she has started to become more of a proper woman, I suppose, in the ideas of her day. But she still isn't great at a lot of things that women are expected to be good at, like dancing and singing and music and whatnot. But she's made an effort at least. But she also loves reading. She loves reading, especially these gothic novels, especially The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. And that's, I think, part of what I loved so much about this novel was just that it was just it was just permeated by the love of books and the love of reading. And I think I sort of the love of reading in its purest form, where you're just reading because it's so exciting and so fun. And honestly, that's how I read this novel. It was just reading it because it was fun, really. It was just a delight in that sense. Maybe not because it was exciting. It's not an exciting plot-driven novel or anything, but so anyway, Catherine at the beginning of this novel has been staying with her kind of hilariously dull family friends, Mr. and Mrs. Allen, in the town of Bath. And at the beginning of the novel, she meets a young man named Henry Tilney, and they have this incredibly witty, funny conversation, which was the point where I realized I was probably going to really like this book. And he's really charming, and she really likes him, and he clearly likes her. And he is the main love interest of the story. And this novel, I don't think it's spoiling that much to say that by the end of the novel they are getting married. But along the way, we also meet Isabella Thorpe, who is an older girl who's, I think, in her early 20s in this story, and kind of takes Catherine under her wing. They share a love of books and a love of finding a husband and all these other things. And Isabella Thorpe does turn out to be kind of shallow and dubious, but she pursues Catherine's brother, James Morland, whom we meet as well. We also meet John Thorpe, Isabella's brother, who pursues Catherine and is kind of a self-centered, selfish guy, and Catherine isn't that into him, but he tries really hard in the worst way possible to get her. We meet Henry Tilney's sister Eleanor, who is incredibly endearing, and then also Henry's father, he's called General Tilney, who is this really snobbish, domineering, kind of intimidating man. And he's not exactly a bad person, but he is kind of a, I don't know, what we might call today a bit distasteful. And we also meet the Tilney's older brother, Captain Tilney, as he's called, who is a bit like his father, it seems like. Basically this is just about the relationships between these people, really. It's a simple story, simple plot. If I told you too much more, it would just be spoiled. I mean, I've already kind of spoiled the very ending, but yeah, and a large part of this novel takes place at the Tilneys' house, which is this big old Gothic house called, funnily enough, Northanger Abbey, and that's sort of the funniest part of the novel, because the books that Catherine loves are these, like, Gothic novels where people are in these big houses that are, haunted by ghosts, or where a murder took place, and, or something like that, or there's, a skeleton in the closet of some sort, and she goes there, and she's thinking, ooh, what adventures will I find at this gigantic house, and she, like, there's this really funny scene where she's in the bedroom she's been given, and she sees this chest in the side of the room, and she's like, ooh, that looks suspicious, I must look in that. And then she opens it, expecting to find, a skeleton or something, and then it's just a dress. And Eleanor walks in and is like, oh, you found that dress? Yeah, this is a nice dress. And then later, Catherine is looking at the closet in that room, and she's like, oh, there must be something hidden in the closet. And so she goes and she searches the closet head to toe, thinking, ooh, I'm gonna find, like, a note with a scandalous letter, between two people, and she does find a note. She finds a piece of paper with writing on it, and then she reads it, and it's a laundry list, and that becomes a bit more serious as it goes along, but it has this kind of really funny sort of story within the story there, which is almost kind of Don Quixote-esque in the way that it sort of looks at sort of how you can't let yourself be too wrapped up in the stories you consume in books or in movies, because it can distort the way you see the real world. And so part of Catherine's character arc is realizing that the sort of naivete of that. But also a bit more seriously, it's about overcoming a more sort of pernicious naivete, in the sense that I think Catherine starts out this novel with this idea that all people in the world fall into either, the good person or the bad person. And as soon as you do something bad, you must be horrible, and if you do good things, you must be, an angel. And part of her character arc, too, is I think just realizing that, there are people who maybe are distasteful, but who, are still okay to be around, and there are people who are not so great, but who do nice things, or I just said that twice, and then there are good people who occasionally do bad things, or occasionally hurt people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and that's a big part of her character arc as well, yeah, and so I think in that sense, in that sort of naivete, and that sort of rigid black or white thinking, I think that that this has a very honest portrayal of what it's like to be in your sort of mid to late teens, and that sort of mindset you tend to have, or at least I saw myself in that, myself as a teenager, and maybe still to an extent. Yeah, so I like this a lot. It's a fun story, and again, I'm looking forward to reading more of Jane Austen's novels. I can maybe see why this one isn't as revered as her other ones. It's just from what I remember of, like, Pride and Prejudice and Emma, it doesn't have quite the complexity or nuance to it. Henry Tilney is the main love interest. He's basically a decent guy. Catherine is basically a decent woman. And there are certain plot points that could have been handled a bit more dramatically, I think. Could have had a bit could have. I think Jane Austen. There are a few plot points that Jane Austen could have done a bit more with that could have made the story a bit more interesting. But that's not a criticism. That's just why saying that a novel is not as good as Pride and Prejudice is not a particularly major criticism because most novels aren't as good as Pride and Prejudice. I might not have liked it when I read it, but I will acknowledge that it's a great novel. And I will reread it, and we will see what I think of it on a reread. So, anyway, I would love to hear from any of you who have read Northanger Abbey. I'm sure there are a lot of you out there, and I hope you enjoyed. And anyway, I will let you all go, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.